This is Duke University.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening for Exploring Careers Across Industries, a Duke Alumni virtual panel event. We are so excited to host this event for our Duke community of so many students and alumni coming together to explore careers and to hear what some of the fellow alums are up to. I'm Meredith McCook. I am one of the assistant directors within the Duke Career Center here, and I'm also joined by my colleagues tonight, both Monique Turrentine on our employee relations team and Stacia Solomon on our graduate advising team. So we are so glad to have you here. So just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started tonight. Please, all of you as you've entered are on mute. Please remain on mute as a participant until we enter into our Q&A components, just to make sure that we can get through things. There's no background noise, things like that. But please feel free if you have a question for our panelists and want to kind of go ahead and throw it out there for us to hold on to for the Q&A, or you're having any trouble, please throw it into the chat or directly message either Monique or Stacia, and they'll be happy to assist you with that. As well, since we do have a lot of people joining us tonight, if you just kind of a tip for Zoom, if you'll keep it in speaker view or gallery view, that way you'll be able to see our panelist that is currently speaking at that time, as we have kind of assigned questions and we'll have certain people responding at different times, okay? But thank you so much to our panelists for joining us this evening. We're so excited to hear all of the wonderful things that you have to say and share about the work that you're doing in such a wide range of industries. So thank you again for joining us. Just quickly to go over our agenda. So we are going to start with some introductions so that everybody can get to know who our wonderful panelists are, what industries they're representing, and kind of their backgrounds a little bit. And then we're also then going to jump into some questions. As I said, questions that we've prepared with our alums, with the panelists to really discuss through. Then we'll have actually two Q&A components to just break up the session a little bit. So we're going to have one kind of in the middle where we are going to open it up for questions from any of the attendees. Again, please submit those through the chat box for us to then utilize and call upon. And then we'll go back to a few more questions and then have another Q&A before we wrap up tonight. Okay, but the plan is to be done at 7. So we will hopefully stay on time to get everybody where they need to be. And just as a reminder, this event is going to be recorded tonight. So then as we are getting started, so for our panelists, and to keep this a little bit organized, I'm going to call on people as well just to help with that component. But for each of our panelists, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, your current position and employer, where you are, and then also if you'll talk a little bit about your Duke experience and how your major or degree impacted your career, either directly or also considering what are the transferable skills or things that you took from your degree that have helped you in the line of work that you're in currently. So to start, I'm going to call on Clay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Clay Goldwine. My current position is Vice President at CGI, where I'm the account manager for a large federal department. I graduated from Duke in 1994 with a bachelor's in computer science and came to what later became CGI immediately following graduation. I went through the college recruiting process just like you are. The company was called AMS at the time. AMS merged with CGI back in 2004. So it was directly impactful. I was doing software development, and over time I learned about business, and it was able to help me move my career forward in the right direction.
Thank you, Clay. We appreciate it. So next I'm going to call upon Jillian.
I'm Jillian Smith. I'm the class of 2007. I studied literature at Duke. Little preview, other than making me a good writer, I'm not sure how much it helps me in my current role today, but I'm currently the executive director of eCommerce and retailer.com at NARS Cosmetics, which is part of Shiseido. And I definitely think that there's transferable skills at Duke in terms of how interdisciplinary it is. I also have markets and management and policy journalism and media studies certificates, which I think are slightly more applicable, perhaps in my major, but it definitely, I think, gave me some fundamental background to dig in a little bit more from a business and communications perspective than perhaps a literature major.
All right, thank you for that. And Jillian, love the background. Good shout out for Demon. So
I promised Amy I would.
there you go. I'm sure I will let her know that you did it. So for anybody looking at Jillian's background, Demon is the Duke Entertainment Media Art Network. So any of you who are in the creative industries, interested in creative industries, or just honestly creative work at large, Demon is a great opportunity for you to be a part of. The Demon live events that have been happening all summer and into the fall are fantastic and recorded on the Demon website, as well as there is also Demon Weekend coming up. So just a little shout out to kind of enhance that industry as well. So thank you for that, Jillian. Mateo, if you wouldn't mind going next.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Mateo. I currently lead a team of 7, soon to be 8 software consultants that own the design of the software solutions my company provides in the material handling industry. My company is called Dematic. Think about those systems that run everything inside a distribution center, typical for retailers, wholesale distributors, or manufacturing. I started as a manager this past February after working as a consultant for a few years myself. And I started right after graduating from Duke with my Master of Engineering in 2012. Looking backward, my curriculum really put me in the best position to succeed for a couple of reasons. And I think the main one was providing that business background to a very technically strong individual like everyone on the Master Engineering program. My team is responsible for bridging that gap between the business and technical side of things. So that program was exactly aimed at developing individuals that would be able to do that. I still remember one of the classes I took, it was management high-tech industries, and I still remember how surprised individuals with an engineering background were to find out, or I guess to be told, that humans don't really respond to laws like any other physical body in the world. So that's kind of where we got through bridging that gap.
Thank you, Mateo. Appreciate it. All right, next, Tiara.
Okay, so currently I am the field clinical manager of 7 field clinical engineers on the East Coast for my company is called NeuroPace. We do neurostimulation for epilepsy. So we basically have a pacemaker-like device for the brain that specifically treats epilepsy. And so I manage the field engineering team that supports those teams in the field. I actually was a field clinical engineer for about 10 years here, and I've currently been at NeuroPace for about 12 years. I was a biomedical engineer undergrad at Duke and then a master's of engineering management at Duke. So I graduated undergrad in 2005 and master's in 2007. And I think both of those degrees directly translate to what I'm doing now. So the engineering part, when I was in the field actually supporting the device, was directly related to the undergraduate degree. And now that I'm managing a team, the engineering management degree has definitely come into effect there. So definitely both direct translatable skills.
I'm sure it has. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Next, Hayley.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. So my name is Hayley Sanon. I am currently a research assistant at the American Enterprise Institute here in Washington, D.C. I graduated from Duke in 2017 with majors in public policy and political science and a minor in education. And a lot of what I learned in those programs I'm utilizing now in my current role. I would say from public policy, understanding just the DC world and the role of think tanks in the policy process has been really crucial as I've transitioned to this job over the past few months. And one thing I love about AEI specifically is that we don't just do a ton of data analysis, which is certainly really useful, but also a lot of opinion writing and analyzing and communicating what's going on in the education world. And so it's been really great to have had that experience with public policy and transferring those skills of how do I break down a policy, how do I figure out what's going on in legislation and communicate it to constituents and to people that are interested in it. My minor in education was obviously very helpful. Now being in ed policy, it eventually led me to teaching, which I did before this and before getting my master's. But I would say that that has been invaluable of understanding the education landscape, to not just be looking down on it from a policy perspective, but having that ground in experience of being in a school and seeing what it's like to be a teacher and to understand exactly how that policy you're looking at and analyzing is going to impact the field and impact the people doing the work. So I'd say those degrees have been invaluable as I've started this new job.
Thank you, Hayley. Definitely straddling two different industries and worlds. So a great way to combine those together. All right, and then Lee.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lay, and I am the junior member of a small hedge fund in New York named 168 Global Capital. We have around 200 million in assets under management. And before finance, I was in corporate strategy and operations with an IT firm named Gartner. And I graduated from Duke with a bachelor's of science and neuroscience in 2016. I was also pre-med when I was at Duke and finished the pre-med coursework. I think with a STEM degree, at least with neuroscience, I don't find that I use a lot of the material from my coursework in my day-to-day, but the research and the analytical problem-solving approach and the quantitative skills that you gain and sort of build on throughout getting your degree are really helpful in both consulting and finance.
Thank you so much, Lay. We appreciate it. All right, so these are our wonderful 6 panelists for the evening. Hopefully their introductions gave you a little bit of background about them, what they're doing, and what they did at Duke too. So take notes and make notice if you want to reach out to these fantastic people afterwards to talk a little bit more about their pathways, but we're going to continue that. So we're going to jump into our first question. So this question is for Jillian and for Mateo. In your opinion, what are some of the trending career options or titles for those who are interested in your industry area to keep in mind?
I can start, at least from my perspective, which is going to be extremely biased because I basically grew up in the digital space. But basically, I think anything where you're using a digital-based skill set, anything that's sort of data-centric and data-driven, in my job, you can literally measure every little bit of minutia and track every bit of minutia. So we're very deep in the data, I would say. And I think, you know, from my perspective, anything that has to do with growth or performance marketing is definitely a trend that I'm seeing in the e-commerce world. There's sort of, with the current environment especially, there's been a big shift in the retail space on the whole to .com, of course. So I feel like it's really a growth area. If it wasn't a huge growth area and a priority for most companies before, it certainly is now in terms of resourcing and staffing. So I think that that definitely lends itself to opportunities. And I think that throughout the organization, digital sort of touches all parts of the business. So at least having some degree of digital fluency and understanding how different parts of a digital business work at a high level helps. Because, for example, I work with our operations team, I work closely with our finance team, and it sort of touches all of these different parts where people might not think, oh, you know, a finance person needs to have a base level understanding of digital marketing, or say an operations person needs to understand how, you know, products make their way to an e-commerce site. But all those things are sort of, I think, important regardless of where you sit within an organization, at least from a retail and cosmetics perspective.
I guess I'll go next. So I think my thoughts kind of echo Jillian's a little bit. I think the two most impactful forces that have been and continue driving change in the world right now are digitization and automation. So if we just look at the definition of those, anything that has to do with enabling and implementing those two transformations in the field, in any industry really, is probably the equivalent of riding the wave right now. So just looking at the definitions, and I have them written down here. So digitization is the conversion of text, pictures, or sound into digital form. That's the basic definition that can be processed then by a computer. Automation is the creation and application of technology so that processes and procedures may be performed with the least human intervention, whether that's by an actual human or a computer or a machine, perhaps driven by an artificial intelligence. My company specifically does this in the logistics and distribution space, where the power of digital and automation has really been extremely evident, even during this challenging times of an ongoing pandemic, where companies that were ahead of the curve as far as automation and have been able to operate with less humans have really been able to keep up their supply chains going and have been able to deliver what you needed to your doorsteps. Companies that have not done that very well, we'll see what happens all after the pandemic and how well they survive. So I think a lot of customers have learned which companies have done one of those two fields just based on the direct experience of the type of service that they were able to get. And these two trends, automation and digitization, really cut across all possible fields of the human endeavor. They are pursued to increase volumes, throughput, efficiencies in all fields. And again, it's a matter of reducing the utilization of resources and maybe environmental impact as well. In the long term, a lot of activities, maybe even full-time jobs, will be automated. So jobs that will have to do with enabling those transformations will really thrive. Do you have any more time, or somebody keeping me on track here?
Yeah, we have a few more minutes.
Okay. No, I guess there are, if I can add something, there are obviously other trends that are in action in our current age that could be interesting to get into. Perhaps they're just the evolution of past trends that have been ongoing for a while. There's the new focus on health enhancement. Think of wellness and anti-aging that's taken over the health preservation or curing diseases, clean energy production, sustainable food production. Those are all trends that I think may represent interesting avenues to pursue coming out of the education world right now. My advice would be, and it might sound trite, and probably somebody's gonna say this again later, look really for something that you enjoy doing, but also stay open-minded. There may be something that you maybe enjoy doing very much that you haven't yet heard of. Do not fail to try new things just because they are not familiar. And I guess that's probably the spirit of this question. Try not to pay too much attention to anybody else's expectations but yours, as far as financial outlook, satisfaction, or lifestyle. There are plenty of successes in all fields, the most disparate endeavors, whether that's in corporate America or as a YouTuber or TikToker or what have you. If it's something that you enjoy and hopefully makes the world a better place, that's probably something to consider as a full-time occupation. That would be my personal advice.
Thank you for that, Matteo, and diving into those. So it looks like we have a couple of questions coming through, and we'll hold on to those until the first Q&A, but already stirring up some great questions, so thanks for that. So our next question is for Tiara. So what has been the most intriguing and instrumental part of your career path that led to where you are now?
So I would say, so first when I left undergrad and was actually pursuing my master's degree, I was actually working for a pharmacy automation company in Durham, and they ended up cutting half of their engineering staff. And unfortunately, I was doing project management with them at the time, and unfortunately, I got caught in that cut down. But it actually posed a good situation for me to really reevaluate what I wanted to do. I was early in my career. I had been doing project management for a couple of years, and that was definitely part of the engineering management degree. However, I kind of wanted to go back to my roots of biomedical. That's where I started. And it gave me a chance to really explore both options. The reduction in force, and it's inevitable. It's just part of the work world. People have probably seen it, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, and it's probably temporary. But this was also in 2008 when the market started to crash. So as a young person out of school, you don't really expect these things to happen, but it actually allowed for me to look for something that I would really wanted to do long term and to be passionate about. So I spent a couple of months just really working with the Duke Career Office, actually tapping into old advisors, and found my company. And I just was adamant I was going to work there one day. It took me a couple of months to really get through the process and everything, but I researched a lot of medical device companies, and that really pivoted. And I've been here for 12 years. I never thought that that I would be here this long, but it allowed me to explore every aspect of my career as I've grown. And I started out young, and they let me, no experience, they took a chance on me. And then thereafter, I've just grown, and they've allowed me to do other things. But I would say that fluke chance of a reduction kind of forced me to reevaluate what I wanted to do. And it's everybody I've talked to has had that experience. So it's not something to be embarrassed about. It's not something to be ashamed about. It's just what happens in the markets. And I want people to know to stay strong and to actually use that time to network and reach out to your contacts that you've developed over the years, and really just take the time to explore what it is you might want to do. But that was a big pivot in my career, and it's actually put me on the track that I really wanted to be on. It forced me to do some hard things. I could have gone either way. I could have stayed in project management because I enjoyed it, but this is what I really wanted to do in medical devices. And I actually got to do like some FDA work and stuff like that. So it just opened a lot of doors for me. So I would say that was probably the most pivotal.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, just such a really interesting career path and story, and a great example of how sometimes the really unexpected things and the not planned components of our careers have the biggest impact in a really positive way, because I think there's always that fear of the changes and impacts and unknowns are going to affect us negatively. So I love how that really actually helped you take a pause and show resiliency too in that process. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, so we are at our first Q&A component. So for any of our attendees, if you have questions, please throw them in the chat box. I'll be going there to look for them. So we had a couple come through already. And so for this question from Aravic, and apologies if I mispronounce that, but this is for Jillian and Hayley, looking at saying, I studied public policy and have worked in marketing and communications before. How can I merge these two skills? What would your advice be?
I can start. I would say that every policy actor pretty much has some sort of communications and marketing department. I talk to my marketing people every single day. Like, we are in constant communication. They are just a normal extension of our team, because you often find, especially in policy, that it doesn't really matter how great the idea is unless you're able to communicate it and get it out and get people to support it and get behind it. So I would say, as far as combining these two skills, if you're able to find a policy actor, be it a politician or a nonprofit that helps put together policies and propose ideas, even think tanks, if there's a place that's putting together policies that you support and you want to be a part of advancing their mission, get involved in their communications. There's a lot of jobs in that area. And I would say once you find an organization that you support and that you care about, you'll be able to combine those two really nicely in their marketing department.
In full transparency, I only have sort of corporate background, so I can speak more from that perspective, but a place where I sort of see this playing out is sort of in the corporate social responsibility space a little bit. And that can be anything from policies around how workers are treated if you have offshore manufacturing, to environmental concerns, to any kind of area of policy that touches the corporate life. And then there's definitely elements of that that are involved in communications, and there's a lot of things that sort of even touch different parts of the business. For example, when companies, for example, donate to certain social causes, how that gets communicated, determining what social causes that companies want to stand behind and make part of sort of their brand, and those types of things are ways where I see those things coming together, and having that policy background really helps. But that's sort of my only ever having worked in corporate and not ever having worked on the policy or government side of anything. That's how I would see that potentially working.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Okay, our next question is from Sanika. I'm actually going to direct this question to Tiara and Matteo, saying, where in industry do you see engineers who have masters in engineering versus masters in engineering management? What are the pros and cons of each of these degrees as you've seen it in your industries?
I could start.
Sure.
So I do have a engineering management degree. So it actually worked well for me in the project management space because one of my concentrations was in project management. And also it's helping me now in my management role. You could expand it and do like a MBA, but I don't actually feel the need to pursue that at this time because I essentially got it from the MEM degree. Some of the field engineers that I do manage, some of them do have masters in engineering. So our device is highly technical. We're doing a lot of technical support. And I think those, if you're looking to go into medical devices or something of that nature, if you want to design a master's in engineering, definitely does that for you. I had a former coworker at the automation company I used to work for in Durham. She had a master's in engineering from NC State, and she did a lot of design work in our electrical department there. So you kind of are opening the door for yourself to do a little bit of everything. And you could do project management, you could do just design engineering. I didn't want to design, I just wanted to do all the technical aspects of the device while doing patient support. So I kind of combined all the fun things together through that. So you actually, either degree kind of sets you up, in my opinion, to do a little bit of anything that she wants, but the MEM is more business focused.
Matteo, anything?
Yeah, I would actually second that. I did have the opportunity to take less technical classes in my Master of Engineering at Duke as well. So I think you do have the opportunity to complement your curriculum with things that are less technical. I think you have a larger opportunity in the engineering management program. I think I remember some of the classes were actually shared between the two, so they're not that great of a difference, at least in my opinion. It really depends on where you want to steer your career towards. If you are leaning more towards the technical side, that's probably a good indicator of a Master of Engineering. If you are thinking that you may want to move into managing humans, then the engineering management program is perhaps a little better. But to me, when I actually look at resumes, they are fairly equivalent in my opinion, just based on my personal experience.
Okay. Thank you for that and just that insight on the personal side. Okay, so our next question is from Sarah, and this is for Lay. So Lay, how did you manage to get involved with finance and get through that recruitment process as a neuroscience major? And then what resources did you find most useful in getting through that process?
Sure. So as a senior, I actually went through the consulting recruitment process instead of the finance process. And that was what led to my first job at Gartner. I had an interest in finance when I was at Duke, but I sort of looked at the process for the investment banking interview, which is typically the finance track that most people are taking if they're just graduating from college, versus consulting. And I thought that given the amount of time I had to prepare, that I had a better chance with mastering the case interview versus trying to master the investment banking interview. And so I actually landed at my current role through networking in New York. I met someone at a 100 Women in Finance event who knew my portfolio manager from another group that she was in New York, and she sent my resume over to him. But I think it was definitely challenging not having the background in finance and not having the internships beforehand. I think with finance especially, the major is not as important. I have friends who did engineering who are in investment banking or private equity now. I think it is important to try to get involved in the process earlier. So that could be utilizing things like the investment club at Duke and also the Career Center. They would probably have more helpful resources to how to get the, I think what's important is getting that finance internship as like a sophomore or junior.
Yes, thank you for that. So another resource to add into there is the Duke Financial Economics Center. They have great resources and activities for students there who are interested in going into investment, well, in finance at large, but a lot of things around investment banking, sales, and trading. And then in the Career Center, we also have conversations with students a lot around the other areas of finance too, and making sure that finance isn't just a synonym for investment banking and what that looks like. And then for any of our students attending, that recruitment now for that junior summer internship really starts sophomore spring. So preparing for that process and using that insight and information that Lay provided if you are considering that process. Absolutely. Thank you all for taking the time to get through that. Let's see. I also got another question. Let me see. So this is from Jackie. And so if just one person would want to answer this, I'm moving to a new country where I have few connections and I'm applying to a wide range of roles, marketing, communication, sales, etc. I've enjoyed reaching out to Duke alumni or people who have seemed to have similar interests. However, when I am submitting applications cold to companies where I have no connections, would you recommend reaching out to someone in HR or on LinkedIn, or is that overkill? I get the sense that it would be a bit annoying, but I'm also want to ensure that I'm not leaving anything unturned. Any particular insights on that?
I can take that.
Sure, thank you, Clay.
Sure, no problem. So, I mean, in general, your odds of getting any particular position are much stronger if you know somebody than if you're coming in cold. And I think Jackie probably knows that already, and that's why she's focusing on the positions where she's got the connections. With that being said, I think if you reach out on LinkedIn to somebody, the worst that's going to happen is that they're going to ignore you. You're not going to receive any less likely scoring on your interview than you are if you didn't reach out at all. And maybe that connection will make sense. So if you reach out to somebody and you can, you have some sort of connection that you can make, that's great. And sometimes you might just catch lightning in a bottle and that person's looking for something that that matches to you. I'd try to keep it short and, provide some sort of explanation as to what you're looking for. And maybe you ask that person, hey, this is what I'm looking for. If you don't have a position, do you have any ideas on where else I might look? And sometimes they'll respond and give you other ideas.
Thank you.
If I can add one quick note to that, I think just as a matter of practical advice, one thing that really helps when you're reaching out to somebody, and I see this with prospects or candidates that may reach out to me on LinkedIn, if you can find a specific opening on the career website, mention that specifically to the person. Because sometimes I get hit by a lot of people that are trying to ask me what job would be a good fit for them. And it's hard to keep track of a lot of people that I don't know. If you tell me exactly which position you're looking for, then I can see if it might be a good fit. And if I think you are, then I will connect you directly to the hiring manager. That's probably one of the most useful things that somebody could do when reaching out to me.
I've had people go as far as actually sending me their resume. Somehow they found my corporate email which at my current company isn't as intuitive as you might think, but I've had them send it over LinkedIn. And if I'm actually actively hiring and able to fill that role, I always take a look. It's not always necessarily that it'll be a fit, but I always just kind of do take a look just out of curiosity. And I bet that there's people like me. So I feel like, to Clay's point earlier, it can't hurt, honestly.
Thank you for that. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on. I know that we had a few other questions come through, but we're gonna hold it to our last Q&A component. Okay, so moving on, this next question is for Hayley and Lay. What makes a recent graduate successful when entering your line of work? Apologies for the spelling error. or staying on that path.
All right, I would say as far as being successful when you enter, I'll talk about kind of the research side of my job first. I would say being a really critical thinker and being independent in your thought process makes a huge difference. There is so much data out there, and it's important that you have strong data skills. I'd say especially if there are pub poll majors out there that want to go into this line of work and you've done Stat 101, that's fantastic. But if you have more time, take more statistics, more data analysis courses. It's the one thing that I wished I had more of and that I pursued in my master's program. I wish someone had kind of pushed me to do that then, because it makes a big difference and it makes you much more capable at your job in that way. And then two, I would say, you know, because there is so much data out there, once you're analyzing it, you need to be able to really dig in. And I would say that's especially relevant in education. There's a lot of people that say, this has been proven to help kids, or this has been proven to help kids. And they might be opposing prescriptions for the problem, and being able to dive in deeper into what the research is saying, how they're backing that up, whether you think that would functionally work makes a big difference. And then from that education side, more so, I would say having that on the ground experience, spending time in schools, not necessarily having to teach. I taught, and I think it was invaluable for me as I started my career in this work. But I would say just spending time in any capacity in school, volunteering, going to tutor, learning what it's like to be in a school building, because you can hear all day that this is the best program and the, you know, impact, then the estimated effect size are huge. But if it's not going to be able to be implemented well by the teachers that are doing the work, then it's not going to be successful at the end of the day. As far as staying on the path, for education, there are so many ways to be involved. I think that when people hear education, they immediately think, oh, well, that's teaching, and I don't really know if I want to work with kids that much, right? But there are so many ways to be involved in the education space and to make a difference there. Research being one of them, going into administration, going into nonprofit spaces, just a plethora of ways to be there. So when you're looking for jobs, look at both. Where do you think you can have an impact, and what kind of culture fits you best? Some of the best advice I've gotten is thinking about the everyday of a job. I love teaching. I did not love having to follow a bell schedule every single day all year long. So thinking about that real cultural fit is going to make a difference and is going to make you engaged in the work and avoiding that burnout down the road. So look for all the different ways you can stay involved and find the one that best fits you, both in your mission and in your just day-to-day needs as an employee.
Thank you, Hayley. Appreciate it. Lay, how about for you?
I think some things that come to mind are, especially when working at a smaller firm, adaptability, being able to wear a lot of hats, being open to feedback and having thick skin, having the desire to learn and the sense of curiosity really goes a long way. And that's in terms of asking questions and sort of trying to understand the why behind a process or a certain line of thinking. And I think also knowing what motivates you and what drives you is really important. For me, this wasn't really something that I knew intuitively, and I kind of had to try out different jobs, different careers, and sort of figure out what keeps me going on a day-to-day basis. And figuring out what I didn't like was as important as figuring out what I liked in a job. So I think it's important to sort of keep an open mind as you navigate through different roles. And then in terms of hard skills, especially in my current line of work, where my firm trades primarily options and equities, computer science, programming skills, statistics are going to be more important as well. And those were sort of classes that I wish I had taken more of when I was a student at Duke.
Thank you for that information. I'm loving all your shout outs for these transferable skills, Lay. So thank you for that. All right, our next question and last question before we go back into our Q&A is for Clay. So Clay, what internships or entry-level jobs are the best for learning as much as possible in your industry, or kind of if you have any general advice of great starter internships or entry-level jobs for other jobs as well?
Sure. So a few thoughts. I guess, first of all, as Leigh was pointing out, you don't always know exactly what it is that you are going to enjoy and what you're not going to enjoy. And so some of getting an entry-level job or an internship is about trying out something that you think you're going to enjoy and seeing whether or not you really like it. And so if you think you've got an area that's going to be interesting, I'd focus on that area where you can. Not worry too much about what's going to happen down the road, where you want to get to, because you can always pivot over time, and you may not actually want to go the direction that you think you may want to go once you kind of get into things. In terms of the specifics within the IT industry, I recommend focusing on project teams, opportunities where you get to work with other people and you get their ideas and their perspectives, where you can support clients and learn a little bit about how their business operates and not just about the technology, and where you can get some career mentorship and some on-the-job training, maybe some formal training to allow you to kind of move your career forward over time, because those elements will help you both to kind of figure out the direction that you want to go and to take some of those steps in that direction. And one other thing that I'd mention is that, if you go to a company and you find that that you like the culture, don't assume that you're going to like the culture everywhere else. And if you go to another company and you find that you don't like the culture, don't assume you're not going to like the culture everywhere else. You're going to find that each company, each position has a different culture. And so when you find that cultural fit, that's when you want to stick around. And if you find a company that doesn't have the right cultural fit, then that's when it tells you that you might want to be looking for a different position that matches up with the way that you want to operate, with your values, with the the way that people interact, etc.
Thank you so much for that insight, Clay. I mean, just really putting into practice that reflection of what's working here, what's not working here, what are those components that'll be different in different places versus those that are a little bit more specific to the role itself, and finding that good match for skills and interests and values and things like that. So thank you for that insight. Okay, we're gonna roll into our final Q&A. So I have a couple of questions already, and just as before, please, anybody attending, if you have questions, throw them in the chat box and we will take a look at them. So I'm going to address this question to Hayley and to Tiara. This is from Sanika. So is it useful to get work experience before pursuing a master's degree?
I guess I could start. I actually was getting work experience while I was getting my master's degree. I was working full-time and I went to get my master's degree part-time, but I don't think it's necessary. I think, well, specifically for the MEM, there was a lot of people who went from undergrad straight to MEM. So I think that was totally fine. It was meant to give you business experience, whether you had prior work experience or not. But I will say going to work before a master's degree does give you a different perspective in school. It gives you a break from taking classes. One, you get to work full time, but then it also, I think it broadens like your thought process about taking the master's program. It gave me a different approach to it than it did to undergrad, because I did work for a little bit before I started the program, but I was working at the same time. And I wouldn't change that. I enjoyed working while I was doing my master's program. I just thought it was a different experience, and it worked well for me. So I don't think you have to, but it's okay if you do.
I'd echo that. I don't think it's necessary, but I will say that I worked in between undergrad and getting my master's, and I'm really glad that I did. Just also from a financial standpoint, it helped me a lot to have had a couple years to put some savings under my belt before I was like back relying on student loans and, my savings to get through my year of grad school. So I think that made a huge difference. But I also think that what I was learning became much more immediately applicable to the work that I wanted to do. And a lot of that, again, just depends on what you're looking to get your master's in. But I know that I had a deeper appreciation hearing what I was learning in grad school because I knew of a situation that I would apply that to. And because I had a better understanding of the field before I went into it. And same thing, I think like that break from school can be really helpful. I had friends in my program that had just come out of undergrad, and you could tell they were tired of all of the classes and all of the papers and all the coursework. So I think it can be really valuable, but agree that it's not necessary. It's not deal breaking. And I don't think it'll be that much different of a value to your time there.
Okay, so the next question that we have is from Sydney. So having recently taken on a lot of additional responsibility in my position at an environmental policy center after a member of my team left, do you have any advice for advocating for yourself when asking for a promotion or a raise? So I don't have a specific person to direct this to because I don't know who has experience in doing some of this negotiation. So anybody who feels comfortable responding to this, please feel free to speak up.
Yeah, I can talk to that. So, you know, I think it's great that you've taken on new responsibilities. That's a great first start. What I'd recommend is that you try to put yourself into your manager's shoes and understand from their perspective, how have you impacted that organization, you know, whether it's a business or a government or whatever it is. How have you impacted that organization, and what's the value that you're providing, particularly what's the value that you're providing that's new and different than what you were providing before. And then, you know, talk with your manager and you know, have an open conversation, try to be reasonable about what it is that you think that value is, and get their perspective. And I would encourage you to think about things from the long term, and not just from the short term. You're likely going to get something out of that. You may not get exactly what you're hoping for out of that. But if it's the right place for you, then don't feel like you have to chase the dollars every time. Over time, you'll have the opportunities to grow your career. And if you go someplace else, you may find that you'll have another great experience, or you may find that you'll be in a spot that you're not as happy. And so you need to kind of weigh those things as you evaluate what to do based upon what you hear from your manager.
I'm in the process actually of trying to get a promotion for someone on my team. And what it boils down to sometimes is sort of understanding the environment at wherever you're working at the time. Retail is a really tough environment right now. So that's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle, regardless of whether or not she's worthy of a promotion, has done the work. Also, it sometimes comes down to, from a corporate governance perspective, whether or not you've been in your current role long enough, whether or not you've taken on enough responsibility to sort of fit a certain band, if that makes sense. So these are all sort of ongoing conversations that we're having. But I do think if you feel like you are worthy of a promotion, I think you owe it to yourself to have that conversation with your manager and at least ask, you know, what the steps would be or what you'd need to demonstrate to get to that next level. Because I'm always looking to make sure that if I can't give the person what they're looking for right then and there, I'm able to at least draw a path out for them to achieve that, or demonstrate to my leadership enough so that we can get them that promotion. And that way they at least feel on the receiving end heard, and like there's an action plan in place to get them moving in the direction they want to go at. So I wish you luck, because I know that those can be challenging and scary conversations, but I definitely think keeping documentation of everything that you've taken on helps, keeping documentation of your achievements, etc. Sort of knowing what the next level looks like will help you in those conversations.
Thank you for that information. Appreciate that insight from both of you and kind of representing those different industries. So this next question is actually for Lay. So Lay, within the financial industry and such, we've seen a lot of changes in recruitment of students over the last couple of years, and kind of the structuring as well within financial industries of trying to hold on to people a little bit longer or going a little bit more to the tech side of things and such like that. Are there any projections that you have seen and would be willing to share about what you're seeing the industry going towards in the next 3 to 5 years?
Sure. I think, and for full transparency, I've been in my role for about a year, and I don't have any sort of prior exposure to finance. But I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, at least in my line of finance, which is more on trading. Specifically, my portfolio managers were both have a career in proprietary trading. I think that area, that very niche area, is going to be just more more computer science oriented, more programming oriented. I've seen more people at the junior levels who are hired for like having had a comp sci or a math background, even physics as well. So I think there's going to be, I think automation is going to be or going to play a bigger role within trading. And then I don't really feel like I can speak a lot to investment banking or even sell side sales and trading because I just don't have exposure into that area.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that information though. Appreciate it. I mean, I feel like in a year you've learned a lot though. So not to downplay that at all. Okay, another question came in and this is for Jillian. So looking for students interested in e-commerce, marketing, retail and such, are there particular publications, professional associations, things like that that you would recommend students be following and being involved in?
So if you're interested in sort of retail on the whole, there's a few that come to mind. Obviously, Business of Fashion is one of them. It reports very closely on both beauty and fashion. I'm new to beauty. I've been at NARS for a year, actually recruited by a fellow Blue Devil. So I would definitely recommend Business of Fashion. And then I'd recommend Women's Wear Daily. And then there's also Vogue Business. So those are three right offhand that I feel like stand out and do a good job of having sort of industry coverage. In terms of associations, on more of the luxury fashion apparel side, there isn't very much really, but when I moved over to beauty, there's the Cosmetic Executive Women's group, and basically sort of everyone can be a part of it. There is a membership associated with it. I don't sort of know if there's fees for students or if they allow students in, and they host industry events and publish sort of industry newsletters, if you will. So that's something else that my company sort of sponsors on behalf of all of its employees. And then there are certain, just to sort of stay atop of sort of not necessarily trends, I wouldn't call it trends, but just sort of the buzz in the industry from more of a social perspective. I follow both of these Instagrams. One is Estee Laundry and the other is Diet Prada. And this is not a joke, but they do a really great job of exposing the industry for sort of their lack of a better way of putting it, misfires. And it really helps you educate yourself on the different brands, what's going on, what the consumer sentiment is and that kind of stuff. So if you're going into any kind of conversations or trying to evaluate certain things on corporate culture, you might catch some interesting insider insights. I'll just say that.
No, helpful. I was not prepared for the Instagram added, so I really like that. I'll have to look that up. Absolutely. I also, as a counselor, I have heard Adweek is really good for students to be following and looking at, as well as the business section of the Wall Street Journal, and then potentially in marketing, looking at the American Marketing Association. So certainly kind of researching that just to add to that list. So, but you pulled out some new ones on me, so I'm gonna have to go look at those.
I'm very far removed at this. I used to work in digital advertising, but I'm a little further removed from the ad world at this point, so it's not always top of mind.
Sure, no, understandable. So we have come to the end of our time together. I hope this has been so helpful to everybody of just taking a little glimpse into these various industries and potentially finding some new alumni contacts to get in touch with and expand your network with and such too. So thank you again so much to our panelists for sharing your insights, your personal stories and advice to all of our attendees tonight. This was just a great way to get the Duke community back together, so many students and alumni. So appreciate that. Just a couple of notes for our attendees. So I do want to give another little plug for Clay. CGI has an info session at 7 o'clock, so we're going to let him run and jump over to that. That is on the Career Center site. Or Clay, do you want to throw that link back in the chat box just in case?
Will do.
Thank you for that. So that way, if anybody's interested in attending and hearing more about CGI, please hop on over to that. In addition, any upcoming events from our employers or from the Career Center at large, for any of our current students or one-year out alums, those are all housed within Career Connections if you're interested in. For alumni who are 2 years or more out, looking at the DAA website for other upcoming events and lifelong learning experiences, absolutely check out there. And then also for our current students and one-year out alums, you still have access to work with the Career Center for any advising that you're needing. And then last but not least, just a little teaser to share that we are going to be sending out to all registrants the recording from tonight, as well as the bios of all of our fantastic panelists. And we asked them to share a little goodie to add into that of their best career advice that was ever shared with them. So we will be following up with you with all of that information. But thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Career Center. Thank you.